Get going this morning. Just wanted to, first of all, thank Council for allowing a few minutes on the agenda to provide just a quick update in terms of what we're doing to improve our city's transit stops. As you know, and many of us are aware, when you look at our transit stops, we have lots of stops that need ADA improvements. We need bus benches. We need bus shelters, and we are working as staff diligently to address those as aggressively as we possibly can with the resources and the time that we have to look at those issues. So I want to take you back and remind Council of the relaunch and the rebranding we did of our bus service back in 2014. We've talked a lot about how we looked at improving our frequency. We have talked about the directness of the routes, trying to make the system easier to use and more predictable. But one of the other things we initiated during that time was really taking a hard look at our bus stops and what would it take to improve those bus stops. And so as we started working through that process, there were several, I guess what I would consider to be strategic elements that came about and have really put us in a position to where we are today, able to pretty quickly install shelters and bus bench pads. So first of all, the COTPA board selected a typical shelter design. And the shelter design that we use now, the standard design, you can see it on the slide here. It's basically three solid sides to the shelter to protect from the elements, the wind, the rain, and so forth. You'll notice the sides are clear glass, so you have the enhanced visibility, really an enhanced feeling of safety when you're at the stop because you have so much visibility. Each of the shelters has a security light along with a trash receptacle. Once that shelter design was approved, we also did some work with the planning department in looking at our street furniture ordinance. That led to some discussions and some renegotiations of the agreement with our advertising vendor. And basically what we came up with there, the COTPA board, they established what I would consider to be an ADA standard in that we're not going to put any new bus benches or bus shelters out in the system without them being ADA accessible. Now, we did have a lot of benches that were in the existing right-of-way that were essentially grandfathered in, but any new street furniture would be ADA accessible. And then, of course, Council continuing to support their priority to make a transportation system that works for all residents has certainly helped us keep the momentum going towards improving bus stops. Also wanted to mention some of our partner departments because really this has been a team effort between the planning department, the maps department, public works, general services with their ADA expertise. And so with that, even through the MAPS 3 sidewalks program, a lot of those sidewalks were on bus routes, which meant sidewalks were constructed to enhance the connectivity of some of our existing bus stops. And then public works, whether it be through their project management services or even through some of the funding sources available with GO bonds, have really made a difference in being able to construct these concrete pads and the connecting sidewalks where we put the shelters. So with the emphasis on improving transit stops for our city, our staff, through our regular strategic business planning process, we developed a bus stop management program. And you can see the purpose statement there. I won't read the entire thing to you, but it is to provide bus stop maintenance and enhancement services so that our customers can have safe, accessible, and convenient bus stops. Through this bus stop management program, we have a family of performance measures. We look at things such as the percentage of our bus stops that are ADA accessible. We track the number of new bus shelters that we install on an annual basis. We look at the percentage of bus stops that have shelters and benches. We try to track all that information so we can continue to kind of keep score and get better. The slide that you see here is really kind of a collection of the different type of stops that we manage. We have many stops that are simply a bus stop pole only with an informational sign. We have locations where we have benches and poles, but we still need some ADA improvements. Then we have some locations where we've actually constructed the improvements. You can see here, kind of in the middle, the image of the ADA accessible concrete pad with a bus bench on it, and then of course the shelters that we had mentioned. So, with this emphasis again on improving bus stops, we know just by driving around, it's intuitive that we have room for improvement, lots of room for improvement with our bus stops. But we also go back, and anytime we're looking at making transit system improvements, we always try to also go back to what are our customers, what are our residents saying. And so the next slide here has some information from our latest resident survey. And this is where we're asking residents, which are mainly, in a lot of cases, non-users of the system, what are those important characteristics that would make you consider using the transit system? And you can see that frequency and how long it actually takes a person to make a trip are kind of those top indicators. But really, when you look at the results, almost a third of the respondents also indicated that sheltered bus stops are one of the main criteria that is important for, again, a bus service that they would consider to use. So where does that have us with bus stop improvements? This pie graph here will give you a sense of kind of the breakdown of our bus stop locations. We have 1,363 total bus stops within the EMBARK system. 175 of those, or you can see 13%, have a shelter. And I am pleased to report that as we've begun emphasizing the need to improve our bus stops and install shelters, we've actually installed 102 additional shelters since we started this program a few years ago. So we've more than doubled the amount of shelters we have in our system. 840 of our bus stops currently have a bench, so that's 62%. And then we have 348 of our bus stops, roughly a quarter, that are basically a bus stop pole only. And again, those are locations that when we do end up putting a bench or a shelter, they will be upgraded to be ADA accessible. And then this map here, I think I've shared this with you before, and we're getting so many different projects on the map, it's really hard to tell exactly where each one is specifically, but really what I hope the takeaway for you from this map is that the bus stop improvements that have been completed are throughout the system. They're throughout the city. Particularly if you look at the green dots, those are the 102 new Brasco shelters that we've built. You can see they're really spread throughout the system. We've also completed 24 stop upgrades during this calendar year, so that could be a shelter pad, that could be a bus bench pad, and then we have 21 stop upgrades that are still in progress. And so of those basically 45 locations that we're upgrading, I would expect at least half of those to also receive shelters. So the next few slides that I have here, just some examples of some of the new shelters and improvements that we've completed, again, with the assistance of Public Works and other departments. So this is a bus stop at Reno and May. This bus shelter actually serves Route 9. Route 9 basically provides service along Reno out to the Reno and MacArthur area at our mini hub, which we refer to as Greenfield Center Place. One of the interesting things about Route 9, it is one of our highest performing routes in terms of riders per service hour at 25.31 riders per service hour. And keep in mind, our target for the system is 18, so it's overperforming. This next slide here is a bus shelter that we installed in front of ACOG at 42nd and Lincoln. Route 18 serves this location. And again, when you think of ACOG, and they're really a partner with us in promoting public transit, they have a lot of public meetings there, and so certainly a location where we felt we wanted to have a bus shelter to make it even more accessible to our customers. And then this next location here, this is a shelter that we just completed at Newview, and if you're not familiar with Newview, they are a large employer of individuals that are visually impaired. And so they're a great partner of us. We have customers from Newview that use the fixed route bus system as well as the EMBARK Plus service. And again, this is one of the recent shelters there at Newview. Here's an image of really a work in progress. This is Chartel Towers. I believe this is right off of, right between Western and Chartel. This is a senior apartment complex, And basically what you see here is, picture before versus the sidewalk that's been added, the shelter pad that's been built, and then we'll come back and we'll put a shelter in to serve that location. Route 13 actually provides a service to Chartel Towers. And then this location here, 4th and Walker, now we're looking at some bus stop improvements that aren't necessarily tied to new shelters. But again, here's a location at 4th and Walker served by Route 38. And our advertising contractor has been working with us to replace the benches in the downtown area from the concrete and wood plank bench that you see to the left to a style that is permanently mounted to the concrete and is really more complementary of the P180 look and feel that we see through downtown. So that's an ongoing project as we replace and upgrade the benches in the downtown area. Here's one at Main and McKinley. Again, this is Route 9, but this is a concrete pad that's just recently been completed. Another one at 29th and Miller, both routes 11 and 12 serve this stop. And then this particular location here is one of my favorite ones to talk about, in that this image that you see on the slide is one that we used a couple of years ago when we were having community meetings to talk about the whole Better Streets, Safer City initiative and the 2017 GO bond. And we use this picture right here at Northwest 56 and Independence. You can see Integris there just in the background, of a location that needed some work. It needed an improvement. And so the next slide here will show you that work has been completed. And that's a result of those initiatives passing and putting those dollars to work to make those improvements that we talked about in those community meetings. So in addition to the concrete pad, the curb cut that you see there, you also see some pedestrian crossing signals have been added. And then the last shelter that we'll look at here, Councilwoman Hammond was kind enough to help us out with a photo op there. So this is our 100th shelter, 100th new shelter, I should say. So we're pretty excited about that. And at the conclusion of this presentation, we'll leverage this photo to broadcast this on some different social media platforms. So with that, as you can see, we've certainly made some improvements to both bus bench locations as well as shelters. But thinking of shelters in particular, we've added as I mentioned, over 100 shelters now. And so one of the things that's important to us is, okay, now that we're putting all these shelters out there, we've made this initial investment in these assets, how good a job are we doing in maintaining them, which is basically keeping them clean, keeping them mowed. And so this is data from our most recent customer survey completed in February of 2019, and you can see that 66% of our customers indicated that the cleanliness of the shelters is good or excellent. We received a fair rating from 25% of the respondents, and then 9% gave us the below average score. But I will say that probably our biggest challenge with getting these new shelters out there is the maintenance, and it's really just continuing to keep them clean, keep the trash emptied, and so forth. But we're certainly pleased by the 66% overall rating there. And so where do we go from here? Well, as we look into the next fiscal year, we plan to continue to aggressively add new shelters, enhance existing bus stops. One of the resources that we're going to use, of course, and again, to the credit of the Planning Department, Public Works, all those that are associated with Bike Walk OKC, they've identified some transit priority areas and some pedestrian priority areas, projects that will be coming. And so anywhere we are constructing sidewalks in those pedestrian and transit priority areas, anywhere where there's a transit stop, then that's going to be obviously one of the areas we're going to want to make sure we put new bus shelters and bus benches. The other thing that we'll be looking at and that we always consider when we add new bus shelters is boardings. And right now our goal is to put a shelter at each location where boardings exceed 10 per day. We also rely on direct feedback from customers. Often we do receive suggestions from customers on bus stop locations, but also, need for shelters. And then we also always look at specialty trip generators. There are occasions where maybe there's not 10 boardings a day, but because the stop is located, let's say, near a medical facility or maybe a senior living center, maybe a school, those are also locations that we'll consider for bus shelters. So our goal next year is really to try to meet or exceed the number of shelters that we were able to install this year, which was 45. And again, we'll be working aggressively to do that. So again, just a quick presentation to kind of provide an update of where we are with our bus shelters, and we'll continue to move forward installing them as quickly as we can.
I just had a couple of questions for you. I hate to put you on the spot here. For the stops that we have that are closed and have bus shelters, are we removing and putting those in higher traffic areas, or are they just going to stay closed and in shelter?
Yeah, we plan to eventually relocate those shelters. But right now, the way the shelter installation works is our contracted advertising vendor is the one that installs the new shelters. And so really it's just a priority to us to make sure those resources are directing at putting the new shelters up versus relocating the old ones. Some of the old ones, depending on how they're constructed, cannot be relocated. So for the time being, we've just left them closed, knowing that eventually we do need to address the ones that are still in the right-of-way that aren't being used.
That's really, okay, we'll talk later.
Okay.
But my other question, though, the slide that you had with the bench upgrades on 4th and Walker, are we able to use those older benches and maybe put them at just some pole stops?
Yeah, absolutely we can. But again, when we see a bus stop that just has a pole, the COTPA Board of Trustees is committed to not putting a bench out unless it's ADA accessible. Thus the backlog, but it's a fine line. We don't want to continue to put them out on uneven surfaces, grassy areas if we don't have to. So at this point, we're only putting additional benches out in ADA accessible or locations that we've made ADA accessible.
So if there's not a sidewalk that's already in the area, but it's a mid-block stop, would putting a pad down and then putting a bench there be sufficient to meet those requirements, or to meet the ADA, do we have to go further?
Yeah, generally what we'll do is we'll have to connect a sidewalk to the nearest intersection.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. I believe I am, but it seems that 53% of respondents said frequency of the buses is a priority for them?
Yeah, when asked to rank the top three, basically the top three things that they think or they want to see in a bus system, yes, frequency.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard you say before about 15 minutes is about the frequency, the national kind of research standard of what would make a reliable public transportation system?
Yes, 15 is a good frequency you see throughout the industry.
And then bus shelters being another priority for people as well?
Right, nearly a third of the respondents ranked covered bus shelters as one of the top three things that would essentially allow, or where they would consider using the bus system.
And then the duration of their trip, that was the third.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I just want to say thanks, EMBARK, for getting Councilwoman Hammond and I, well, first, thanks for all you do.
Thanks.
And thanks, Councilman Greenwell, for serving on COTPA. I like that. Thanks for getting Councilwoman Hammond and I out to the zoo.
Oh, you guys
We took the city buses up 4th Street to MLK, and I have to tell you, and we noted it on the way there and on the way back, that 4th Street up to MLK, someone got on and off at every single stop. Our bus was never even close to empty, not one. I mean, so that told us something about that. So, thanks.
Well, I got one better for you because Jason and I rode on a Sunday, Route 22, that same route, and it was just as packed on a Sunday. So
It was. That was fun.
it was pretty fun.
Cool.
Well, and I just want to, are you done? I just, that stop at 56 and Independence, like, that I'm like literally feel like I'm about to cry because the number of times I've had to get off at a stop that looks like that, and knowing that I'm like fairly mobile, but sometimes I have my bike with me and it's a very awkward proposition. But just thinking how much that improves the experience of someone who does have a mobility device, who has a stroller, from having to like stand in the street probably, or somehow awkwardly get their like kids in a stroller up on that really strange incline. It just is amazing. And I just, again, want to echo Councilman Cooper, just thank you to EMBARK. It's just amazing what you all have done with the limited resources that you have. So thanks for all your work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and much more to come on this topic over the summer, but a major effort in bus shelters is certainly a viable discussion point for MAPS 4. So.
Good. Thank you.